Okay, a few days since my last video, I was waiting for my muse to appear, which I hope she has done now. We've talked about two of the links in Paticca Samuppada, link 12 being the fact of suffering in life, and number 11 being the fact of birth. So birth is a necessary condition for the arising of subsequent sorrow, lamentation, pain and despair. I should also point out that in Buddhism we regard the mark of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, the mark of suffering, to be fundamental to experience, in the sense that all conscious experiences are made up of components which are transient and conditioned, which means they arise and pass away outside of the control of any self. And so that means to grasp, to cling on to what we call the aggregates, the five aggregates, as being me or mine or myself, as being ownable and controllable, and of potentially being productive of happiness, lasting happiness, is a mistake. It's the mistake, because it is the nature of all conscious experiences to arise and pass away due to conditions. No lasting satisfaction or security can be gleaned from them. So that's an important thing to bear in mind when we come on to the next link, or the necessary link that gives rise to birth. And in the last video I was making the point that what the Buddha discovered was the necessary link that gives rise to birth is past action. So there has to be a prior action which then gives rise to a subsequent experience. For there to be an experience, a subsequent experience, there has to be mind and body, and there has to be working sense media in order for conscious experience to arise. So it is all about necessity. For that conscious experience to arise, there has to be mind and body, which means there has to be birth. And what the Buddha is pointing out is the law of kamma, what some people call karma, which is that every action, this is a fundamental law of life, as fundamental as the law of gravity, as real as the law of gravity. Every action undertaken with a view of self, so undertaken with a dualistic mindset, the belief in myself as a separate, autonomous, sovereign, solid, enduring entity, separate from the rest of experience. Any action undertaken with that view must produce a result that is experienced by the doer of the action. So that's how we get this cycling. So for every action there is a subsequent experience. That subsequent experience then gives rise to further action, which gives rise to further experience, and so we get this law of action and result, which is the basis of Paticca Samuppada. So if we cast our mind back to the first video that I did, I pointed out that what made the Buddha, one of the many things that makes the Buddha so special, was his recognition that no action that he can undertake, either a positive action or an action of negation, could get him off the wheel of rebirth, for precisely this reason, that every action that he undertook meant that there had to be further resultants, further resultant experience that he needed to experience. So this means that no amount of austerities, of doing without, will burn away your kamma. The very act of doing without is new action which must produce a result. And so that was his great discovery. And so the that gives rise to birth, he called pawa in the Pali, becoming. So what we mean by becoming in this regard is the actual action that is undertaken based on your desires, your intentions, your deliberations, your needs, your wants, your philosophy, your outlook. All those things have to be actualized. There has to be the enactment of those desires, of those needs, of those wants. And that's the necessary precondition for subsequent experience. For there to be subsequent experience, there has to be mind and body, therefore there has to be birth. So you can boil it down by saying, for there to be the birth of any experience, there is always prior action. Now this is the thing with the Buddha's teaching that we always have to bear in mind, is that everything that it talks about must be observable in our experience. The Buddha said his teaching was a come and see thing. So it must be open to scrutiny, not just intellectual scrutiny, but the scrutiny of direct mindful observation. And the truths to which his teaching point must be observable, they must be discoverable. So is it possible to see that there is prior action before an experience takes place? And of course it is. Where did this video come from? It originated as an idea in my mind. But if there had been no action, it would have simply remained an idea in my mind. So there had to be the enactment in mind, in body and speech, actions that give rise to the subsequent birth of this video. If I can put it like that. So through just mindful observation of your experience, you can see that prior to every new, fresh experience, there has to be some kind of intention, and then there has to be some kind of enactment. And that's what becoming is. So even something as simple as just deciding to go into the kitchen. So standing up and opening the door is necessary in order to get into the kitchen. It is a necessary condition for the birth of that new experience. And there has to be mind and body and the sense bases, the sense media, in order for the actual conscious experience of being in the kitchen to occur. So that's what becoming is. It is the enactment of our desires, our deliberations and so forth. And one thing occurs to me in considering this is that people can see that relatively easily in their ordinary experience, but when it comes to the belief, the having the idea of a subsequent birth, a future life, they say, well, how is there a link between that? How can you say that what is true in this experience will be true in, post-death, the dissolution of the body? How do you know from just looking at this that occurs? And there are two aspects to this that immediately spring to mind. Firstly, through the actual practice of insight meditation, you look at the ultimate actual components of any conscious experience. So you're, as it were, deconstructing a conscious experience into its component parts, and you're observing how all those components are arising and passing away due to conditions, and that you recognize there is the clear, insightful understanding that you are indeed looking at the way in which all conscious experiences arise. That it's not just common to this state of affairs, that indeed conscious experience could not arise in any other way. Conscious experience could not arise in any other way apart from due to the arising and passing away of conditions. And secondly, there is the recognition that there is no requirement for anything unchanging that runs through a whole series of experiences. So what we think of as the self, we think of it, it's the me, the same entity that's in the living room, that stands up, walks through into the kitchen to make themselves a drink or a sandwich. There is the belief that there is a thread running through all those myriad moments of consciousness arising and passing away. There is something which extends through time in an unchanging way. And that's the belief in the self-view. And what we discover through insight practice, which is just simply quietening the mind and observing ordinary everyday conscious experience arising and passing away. So it's not, in that sense, it's not doing anything unusual. It's just our ordinary experience that we're looking at. But through doing that, there is again the clear recognition that there is no requirement for that enduring, unchanging entity for all those conscious experiences to occur. So life is completely, every aspect of existence is observable and understandable, and every component part of experience is taken account of, and it is seen how all experiences do indeed arise without the need for any enduring, unchanging entity. So if you think of it like conventionally, we think of it as though it were a necklace with pearls on the necklace, and there's a string running through the pearls of the necklace. And so we think that there is something enduring that passes through. Whereas the reality is, you see that there is just this endless stacking of experience, one after another, a flow, continual flow of experience, all of which are made of these components which arise and pass away, and there is nothing that runs through which is unchanging. And there is no requirement for anything unchanging to be in experience, for experience to occur. So there is a view of self, but there is nothing concrete behind it. And what the Vipassana, the insight meditator, comes to understand is that there is indeed just this endless flow of experience, but there is nothing which runs through with it. There is no conscious witness behind everything. There is nothing unchanging. It is all just arising and passing away, rising and passing away. So in reality, you have a situation where there is an immaterial process which gives rise to a material process, just looking at it in ultimate terms, which is totally magical. It is totally magical that an immaterial process can cause a material process to occur. Like that is a material process occurring. Its genesis is an immaterial desire, a desire to do. So if you get up, if conventionally speaking, you get up to open a door, there is an intention, there is a volition, and then there is the actual action, which gives rise to a material process. That material process arises and passes away. And that's what's going on. There are immaterial processes, there are material processes arising and passing away in ultimate terms. And that is an endless process. It's beginningless and endless. And the ethical aspect of kamma is simply that it is the quality of the intention and the volition behind the action which determines whether those subsequent experiences are going to be largely pleasant with wanted perceptions or largely unpleasant with unwanted perceptions. So your degree of comfort, your degree of discomfort, your degree of happiness, your degree of unhappiness, your degree of pleasure, your degree of pain, is determined by the kind of action it is, which is determined by the links before becoming. So can you see what I'm really trying to get at is that becoming are the action, is the necessary link which gives rise to subsequent birth. I think I've explained that as best as I can. But given that we've got endless time to play with and endless opportunity to keep going back round this, as a final thought, can you actually see that what I'm doing, if you look at Paticca Samuppada, what I'm actually doing is talking about all the links that are actually prior to becoming. So I was talking about the need for there to be consciousness, which means there has to be mind and body and the six senses in order for there to be the conscious experiencing, which relates to the links 3, 4 and 5 and 6. So there are many levels to Paticca Samuppada, but we'll gradually go through it. But I hope that's helped explain how it is that action gives rise to action in mind, body and speech, gives rise to subsequent experience. Any thoughts, comments, ideas, challenges? Feel free to comment below. I'm very happy to hear anything anyone has to say about this. And speak to you again soon.